If y'all would just use my best teacher voice. Shh. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Just want to get started. So I know people have 1 o'clock meetings. I want to get through this as quick as possible. So thank you all for coming through on behalf of the ROC, Relics of Color. Thank you for celebrating the first event for Filipino American Heritage Month. My name is Virginette. Filipino American History Month. Thank you, Gina. My name is Virginette. I'm with the marketing team here, part of the Relics of Color. So thank you all for coming. But before we have our esteemed guests present from the Undiscovered crew, I want to give you a little bit of a history lesson. So Filipino American History Month was established in 1988 and October for a very special reason, not because it's my birthday, but that it was actually because the first Filipino Asian Americans, actually landed here in America in Morro Bay, down by Cal Poly Slough, in 1587, 33 years before Plymouth Rock in 1620, where the Pilgrims landed. And they came by way of the Manila galleon trade, so trade between Manila and Acapulco. So fun fact. And secondly, it's after the birth month of Larry Itliong. So if we all know about Cesar Chavez, a part of the UFW, United Farm Workers Movement. So he's mostly known with Dolores Huerta and whatnot, but Larry Itliong was really instrumental in moving the Delano grape strike. So that's the reason why our migrant workers have their rights today. So with that, I want to bring along some very special people to the stage. So I want to introduce the folks. Who's heard of Undiscovered SF Night Market? Oh, great. So the folks at the Mint, all right, y'all know about it. So these are the wonderful people behind it. I'm just going to give them a short intro, and I'm going to get out the way for them. So this is Desi Dangana, and he's Executive Director of Cultivate Labs, which is the organization that puts on Undiscovered. He brings 15 years of experience creating, funding, and branding unique business concepts which span the food, music, and technology spaces. As a dedicated community advocate, Desi is currently leading the strategy for the economic development of SOMA Pilipinas, a newly designated cultural district in SF. You guys notice the streets in SOMA, that particular area, like Lapu-Lapu, all the street names are named after Filipino heroes. He believes community consciousness and culture are the keys to developing today's thriving commercial ecosystems. And with him today to present as well is Gina Marico Rosales, right here. Gina leads events and is a board member at Cultivate and describes herself as an events enthusiast, efficiency nerd, dancer, and nonprofit advocate. As a marketing events leader at X, formerly known as Google X, Gina creates opportunities for the community to engage with X and their moonshot projects. She's also the founder of Make It Marico, an SF's event company focused on creating magical, meaningful moments through events. So with that, let's give a warm New Relic hand to Desi and Gina.
Check. Hi, everyone. I'm Desi. I often give this presentation to community activists and government stakeholders, but it's really rare for me to actually do it in front of a room of people in the tech industry, because I actually came to the Bay Area in the summer of '99 for the first .com boom. This was a time when the internet didn't have broadband. We didn't have iPhones, and we had to design websites that had to load up under 30 seconds with 36K of graphics or less. So it was a much different time. And I remember coming up to the Bay Area and being really excited about creating this whole new world of the internet and how we were going to transform the world around us. 15, 18 years later, we created the internet. And I hate to say this, but I don't think our world is any better than what it was before. How many people have lived in San Francisco for more than 10 years? Raise your hand. Okay. So if you've lived here for more than 10 years, you've seen a lot of drastic changes. Number one, you've seen a rise in homelessness. You've seen a rise of shit on our streets everywhere. And the biggest problem is income inequality and displacement. So what we're going to show you today is kind of our hopes and dreams as San Franciscans, as people from tech, to kind of reinvent development in our city and hopefully kind of address this kind of economic displacement that is happening in San Francisco and all over the world. So SOMA Pilipinas is the newest cultural district in San Francisco. It's quite large. It goes from 2nd to 11th Market to Brannan. And it's a very interesting confluence point in San Francisco for a lot of different reasons. Number one, the most obvious one is that there are dozens of billion-dollar tech unicorns all over South of Market. Number two, it's also an area where there are billions of dollars of infrastructure spending. pouring into this district. We have the Transbay Terminal. We have the new Red Line subway that's opening up on 4th Street. And we have all kinds of streetscaping happening all over SOMA to really kind of transform this neighborhood into a more livable city. And the third thing that's really interesting is this map is actually not from SOMA Pilipinas. It's actually from the planning department. And so when you see the overlay that there are all these kind of green and blue buildings, this is where they're telling developers to go and buy buildings, buy lots, and build up so we can address our housing crisis. So it's a really interesting nexus point of what is happening in San Francisco. So the history and story that we kind of talked about with Filipinos in about 5 minutes is that Filipinos first came to America as blue-collar laborers, first in Hawaii, then in the Central Valley, and there was this migratory pattern of people working in the Central Valley and going into canneries in Alaska and Seattle, and San Francisco was this halfway point in this migratory pattern. And an unofficial Manila town actually formed right next to Chinatown in the 30s to the 70s. But unfortunately, in post-World War II, there was this gilded term called urban redevelopment. Is anyone familiar with urban redevelopment? Raise your hand if you are. Okay, a couple of you. So urban redevelopment is basically this term that the city and governments would use where they would use eminent domain. They would take property away from people and then sell it back to developers on pennies to the dollar so they can profit. Great examples of urban redevelopment was the Fillmore Jazz District. It was once a thriving African American community, gone. They took all their property away, kicked everybody out, leveled the area, and redeveloped it. And we saw the results on that. So when San Francisco wanted to increase the footprint of the financial district northbound, Manila Town was in the way. So they started taking buildings away, and one of the biggest battles was the I Hotel. Is anyone here fortunate enough to have a rent-controlled apartment building? Raise your hand. Okay, one of the reasons why you have rent control is the I Hotel. This was a galvanizing point for a lot of activists in the Bay Area. The I Hotel was a building that had a lot of longtime residents and seniors. The farm workers lived there. And so when the city wanted to use eminent domain to kick all of these seniors out, a lot of the activists got together and was like, hey, no, we're not going to allow this to happen. And became so controversial that the county sheriff at the time didn't even want to go through the eviction process, and he got arrested. But unfortunately, he got forced to do it. He had to go through the eviction process. The battle was lost. Manila Town was devastated, and the Filipino population shifted to South of Market in the 80s. And you got to really imagine what South of Market used to be in the 80s. It was an industrial wasteland, and it wasn't really kind of like this beautiful kind of like post-industrial landscape that you see nowadays. But before I talk more about that, I kind of want to give you some highlights of our cultural district. One is the Grand Oriente. In South Park, there were a bunch of Filipino farm laborers and workers who figured a way to hack the system, not hacking it in a technological sense, but hacking it in terms of property rights. Because in the turn of the century, if you weren't white, you couldn't buy property in San Francisco. But they figured out the workaround by starting a fraternal lodge, pooling all of their money, and they started buying buildings all over South Park. And quite recently, the Filipino community has worked with the city of San Francisco to landmark some of their buildings, like the Grand Oriente Masonic Temple and the Grand Oriente Hotel. And we've actually purchased it from the Masons to keep it within the community and make it permanently affordable housing for the community. Another very interesting area that we call the senior cluster. This is right behind Yerba Buena Gardens. And it's this little hidden nook and enclave of 4 alleys that create a little circle. And there's thousands of Filipino seniors that live here. And this housing development was actually created because 5,000 Filipino families were displaced for creating Yerba Buena Gardens, the Metreon, and Moscone Center. And this was kind of like the retribution, was to build senior housing for that community. Does anyone go night clubbing 1015? Anyone? Does anyone go at 1015? All right. There's no Filipino history there other than having fun. But right next to 1015, there is a park called Victoria Manalo Draves Park. And the community named the park after her. She was a Filipino Olympiad in 1948. She faced a lot of racism back then. She wasn't even allowed to practice in San Francisco. She had to go to Oakland. She had to change her name. She overcame. She got 2 gold medals. She grew up in Soma, so the community named the park after her. But what really makes this park very interesting is right next to it is Bessie Carmichael Elementary School, and it's one of the few schools in the nation that actually have programs for new Filipino immigrants to acclimate into American society. So as you start to dig through all these different layers of SOMA Pilipinas, what you start to find is that it's really led by this coalition of grassroots organizations that have banded together to turn this once industrial wasteland into a place where you could actually raise your family. So we have people focusing on pedestrian safety, making sure that our grandmas and grandpas aren't abused. We have groups that make sure that our knuckleheads don't fall through the cracks, but also making sure the promising youth get into college. And also there are many groups that are focusing in on tenants' rights and making sure people don't get illegally evicted. And so our whole proposition as a cultural district is we're not a fossilized community. Oftentimes, city governments create these cultural districts as a whoops, sorry, you were once here and here's our memorial plaque to you. This is not the case in SOMA Pilipinas because we still have Filipino families living and thriving in the district. We have Filipino businesses that are starting to emerge, and we're constantly evolving with San Francisco. And we're actually one of the largest Asian groups in the country. So our purpose in creating this cultural district is threefold. One is cultural celebration of a new minority group coming to America and adding to the fabric of life here. Two is trying to preserve our current community here. And third is developing new economic opportunities that Gina and I really focus in on. So one of our major challenges, and there's many, many challenges in developing a cultural district, but the biggest one when we compare ourselves to like Chinatown, Japantown, or even Little Saigon, is that we lack a commercial corridor. This is what kind of really binds all of these different cultural districts together, is when you've entered in to this cultural district because there's a whole corridor of businesses that creates economic wealth and a platform of opportunity for the community. We lack that in SOMA Pilipinas. So the way we're addressing this is, Gina, you want to describe this?
Generate economic. We knew that if we wanted to understand the shop, I'm going to gap here. I'm going to community here. Literally, we took empty space, the San Francisco Mint building, which is a historical building, and they use it for events now. And we took the outside alleyways of Mint Plaza, Mint Street, and we took it over and created this activity, this night market that didn't exist before. And it was all about using unused space and getting people to see it in a new way. And the whole purpose of it is for us to also find entrepreneurs, find all the Filipino entrepreneurs that are out there, cultivate them, have Desi work with their team, help build them up on marketing, get them a following. And whoever are the top vendors that are really thriving in this night market, we can work with them further to place them in a brick and mortar in the cultural district when we get those opportunities. And that's what Desi's team is fighting for hard, is working with the city to get reduced rate and below market rate for these people so we could build this corridor. So to the outside public, Undiscovered is this amazing, super fun night market. It is. That's awesome. But it's also one piece of a larger puzzle of what we're trying to build for this district. So it has a bigger meaning to it. The way it started was I had started my events company, Make It Mariko, 2 years ago. At the time, I was still working at Google X, and I went part-time with them to start my company. Met up with Desi for this Filipino entrepreneurs meetup, which I was like, oh, that's me now. I guess I'll go to that. And he did actually a very similar pitch about SOMA Pilipinas. And at that time, I was like, this is amazing. How come I never heard about this? More people need to know about this. I'm an event planner. Let me throw a launch party and we'll do this big marketing thing and we'll get people to just know that it exists. So that's how the idea started. And then we started building on that, talking to more people. The idea of the night market came up because they're so big in Asia. We're like, okay, we could do that. Let's do that. Then Desi started getting grant money from the city. The city wanted to fund it. They hustle real hard for that to make that happen. And then all of a sudden it's a monthly thing. So it went from becoming let's just launch a night market, one event, to we're going to do a festival every month for 4 months. Okay, Gina? So that became like a full-time job, and eventually I ended up quitting. So I did quit X this February and went full-time with my company, and so this is a huge focus for me now. Um, One of the biggest things, obviously, is like building something like this from scratch. Marketing, we did really great at. At the launch, we had like almost 10,000 people show up. We were expecting maybe 3 to 5,000, and we weren't like half the people couldn't even get in the door. I feel like they have trauma because of that and never want to come back. Now, in our second year, we've moved literally across the street. So, Chronicle Building, Fifth and Mission, we're right behind there. So, we literally take over 2 streets, 2 alleyways, and 2 parking lots, and we transform it into this like creative night market. So there's a whole lot of like logistics going into that and a whole community, but it's all like for this larger purpose. Cool. Yeah. I mean, and so obviously for Undiscovered, we are a night market and we're here to like bring joy, bring arts, bring culture, but we're also trying to create something that's sustainable. So we've got a ton of city grants. This is how much we spent, but what we generated in economic activity was almost twice that. And over 35,000 people over the past 2 years have come through, not just Filipinos. We're getting San Francisco people coming out from Stockton to come. We even had one girl come out from Wisconsin, because she followed one of our vendors and she was like, I don't know any other Filipinos here. I need to come find this community. And I was like, what? Okay, that's amazing. So like economic activity is really important, because once you start training people like, hey, this is a place where I'm going to go and shop and spend money, now they have that in their head. So once we get the corridor going, then they can like repeat that behavior and we can be sustainable for our vendors. Development strategy. So obviously right now we are targeting Mission, because this is the first place where there are open spaces that we're working with the city to get below market rate. And it's really important that we do the night market close to where the corridor is to get that training behavior. But eventually along the in many years to come, we'll see what happens with the central SOMA plan, if that passes, and what we'll allow there, and if we can expand the corridor to have a second corridor somewhere in SOMA, since SOMA Pilipinas is like a wide swath. And we actually do have a lot of businesses already happening down by Brannan and Folsom Street. And then, so yeah, Mayor Ed Lee, he was a huge supporter. He actually visited the last night market last year before he passed away. That was like a week or something after. So that was pretty crazy. We would not have been able to do it without the city funding. We're working on a pop-up to permanent retail space called Republica that's going to be in the below the Fifth and Mission garage. So that's going to be a really exciting space right next to our night market. This is the target space for it. I'm sure you've all walked past this. It's literally nothing, but so we want to turn this into, this is an amazing space, like right across from like Bloomingdale's, that we can activate with our people. And the concept is just multiple. So we're going to have multiple vendors inside the space. We're still doing a bar. A bar concept too. So it's a place where you can come and hang and shop and just build community. Kiosk format, so we can switch it out and alternate vendors as well over time and have them do a little pop-up and test out, and then that didn't work, let's iterate, do something new. And the long-term goal of Cultivate is to create this merchant association for Filipinos. We want to be able to see and find people and support each other. Oh, I need like a Filipino accountant, or I need to get a dress tailored or something. I want to hire a Filipino maybe so I can support my community. Let me find them. Because we're actually, one of the biggest amazing things we found through Undiscovered is that we thought that there weren't as many Filipino entrepreneurs, but actually they have been here and they've been around, but they weren't necessarily claiming Filipino, because a lot of like old school Filipino mentality is just assimilate, we're just American. But now what Undiscovered has done is given people this sense of pride, and now they feel comfortable and prideful to say, yeah, I'm a Filipino American entrepreneur. And now all of a sudden, they're like popping up everywhere like daisies. I'm like, oh, what? Where have you come from? So, and of course, branding. So we talked about some of the banners that you see in SOMA. If you just look up and see these, like, this is a huge freaking feat. Like, they've been talking about this for 2 years and just made it happen and hustled with the city to make it happen. And seeing this is like such a source of pride for people to look up and be like, yeah, these are our streets. This is our city, you know, and being able to lay that claim. Ooh, I don't know much about this one.
So recently, SOMA Pilipinas has actually won a very prestigious National Endowment for the Arts grant, so we can start to develop more placemaking opportunities in the district, because it's quite large. So you really start to identify it as a cultural district. So here are some kind of ideas that we're kind of circulating. What you see here is an intersection on 4th and Howard, right next to Yerba Buena Gardens. And this kind of colorful pattern is called a benig. So it's basically kind of a woven rattan pattern that you often see in the Philippines in basket weaving or whatnot. This right here is the idea of banderitos. So it's basically silk screening, basically flags, maybe making a youth activity and placing it in a lot of the different alleyways in SOMA Pilipinas. And another cool thing that we launched was our first batch for our business accelerator. We don't have a ton of money like a traditional tech incubator, but the city has given us $35,000 to try an innovative program where we're going to invest $35,000 in 6 businesses in the cultural district. But it's not like an equity deal. We're not going to just give them a check and ask for like 10% of their company. What we're going to actually do is identify what they're trying to do to grow as a company. And oftentimes what we've identified is a lot of like small businesses will skip a lot of like important things as you're kind of like rushing to gain sales. For example, there could be like a growing food truck that has like $100,000 in sales a month, but they don't have accounting systems in place. So they actually don't have an idea if they're making money. So what we'll do as an accelerator is actually build them the accounting system so they can start to monitor their finances, and we can see if we can accelerate their business growth that way, which will hopefully lead to us being able to seed our merchant association in this manner, where we'll take grant money, get our merchants together with the B2Bs and B2Cs, get them to start to collaborate together and kickstart that local economy. But what's most exciting is some of Gina's projects.
All right, cool. So part of what came out of Undiscovered for me too was, as a Filipino entrepreneur, when I first started my business, I actually really doubted myself. Even though I have a ton of experience, I've been doing event planning for over 10 years. Like, I ran marketing events for Google X. But for some reason, me looking at myself in the mirror, I looked at myself and said, like, oh, who am I to like start my own business? The only people I see doing that are white men. And so I totally doubted myself. I had 2 mentors that I looked up to that were Pinay entrepreneurs. And I had this conversation with one of them and said, like, oh, who am I? Blah, blah, blah. I'm this like short, Filipino woman of color. People constantly think I'm in high school. I have to prove myself, blah, blah, blah. And then she basically said to me, like, who are you not to? So that was really important to me. And finding all these Filipino entrepreneurs has been so empowering for me to feel like, oh my gosh, we're not alone. We're out here and we're all doing our thing. And we need to build that community so we can have more support for future generations. I heard this term entrepreneurship before. A Pinay is a Filipino woman. And I just like held it so close to my heart because I shortened it to like entrepreneur. And I felt like it totally encompassed like how I identify. I'm Filipino and Japanese, but just like the idea of being a woman of color and the struggle that comes along with that, but also like how much pride I have in being a Pinay. I hold that so near and dear. And so I really embrace this word. And now this year, there's so much movement happening around Pinays. They're all making moves. We have the first Pinay mayor of Daly City. Can you believe that? Only now. Daly City is like all Filipinos. Only now, the first woman mayor, Filipino. Ruby Ibarra is this amazing Pinay rapper that is making waves. She was in a MasterCard commercial, and she is like creating the soundtrack to this movement. And then recently we had a huge Pinay historian named Dr. Dawn Mabalan who passed away. She was only like, 45 or something like that, very young. And so losing her also reminded us like how much we all need to step up and really work for this community. And so 2 weeks ago, or this whole year, we've been planning this summit called Entrepreneur Summit. And 2 weeks ago, we gathered over 130 Pinay women. Half of them, or more than half of them, already had businesses or have been operating, and then maybe a third were like aspiring. And we gathered them at this co-working space, our co-working space, Kovo, in the Mission. Did lightning talks. So amazing. Like from the get-go, people were, like crying, sharing their stories because of just like the feeling of sisterhood that we were able to create in the room. Tons of branding, marketing, really getting people excited to like claim this word so we can continue to find each other and really support each other's businesses. A bunch of panel discussions. I hosted one called Hustle for a Cause. We did a panel on decolonizing business. Like, how can we stay true to like our, we run businesses in a capitalist society, but we don't necessarily want to operate off capitalist mentality. And then also one about Pinay entrepreneurs who are mothers. So like, what is that struggle? Tons of food. Obviously, I was actually worried. I don't know why I was worried we're gonna run out of food. It's a Filipino event. There's like tons of food always. Ice cubes with Pinay in it. It's awesome. And then at the heart of all of this, like for us, is like we call it Pinayism. This is a term that another doctorate named Alison Cabales came up with, and that really just means sisterhood. And for us, it's like you can't create any kind of entrepreneurship or community without sisterhood or community like comes first. You can teach people about accounting and business and marketing, but at the end, it's not going to be long lasting unless you have community built around it and personal relationships. So.
Cool. So when I first came to San Francisco in summer of '99, it wasn't really in the intention of creating a Filipino cultural district. I came to San Francisco because it was a cool place to live. It was a place where free thinkers, radicals, you could be whoever you wanted to be and be accepted. And that's what I loved about San Francisco. And I think that's what really attracted the tech industry to San Francisco was this environment of innovation, socially, economically, technologically. But along the way, as a San Franciscan now that's been here for like 18 years, I feel like we've lost our values. We've become really preoccupied with monetary gain at all costs, hockey stick growth. But for what? What is the end result? We look around our city and our city is not any better. So what I'm really hoping as a San Franciscan, I'm really hoping that when you guys walk away from this talk, is that what we're trying to do in SOMA Pilipinas is try to rediscover these values of community empathy that made San Francisco great. And if we could keep that value as kind of a guidepost of how we do things intentionally in whatever business or industry we do, then we can make the world really a better place. Because if we can figure this out here in our backyard in SOMA Pilipinas in South the Market, then we can scale this model to all other communities around the world that are facing this hyper-development and economic displacement. So I'm hoping that you can spread the word about SOMA Pilipinas. Come to Undiscovered this Saturday. It's completely free, 4 to 10. It's on 5th and Mission, and spread the word. And please support our cause because it's going to benefit all San Franciscans and hopefully everyone in the world. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Desi and Gina. Really powerful stuff. Does anybody in the room have questions for them or anybody remote in PDX or remote? Yep, Ankush. Let me run a mic to you.
Thank you guys so much. That was really interesting. I had no idea about any of that. A question that I have as somebody, like at the beginning of the presentation, you're talking about people that have, I'm a transplant. I've only been in San Francisco for 5 years. I live in a place in Oakland that's really expensive, which, further supports gentrification. And obviously we all work at Relic, so we already have a lot of privilege to begin with. So aside from supporting some of these cultural events like Undiscovered and things like that, I guess I have like kind of a two-part question. What are other things that we can do to support these kind of communities and these events? And aside from just like monetarily, doing that, like what's the kind of perspective that you like to see from people outside of the community that you feel like is supportive, not exploitative?
Yeah, totally. I'll speak on that because I worked at Google for like 7 years, and I came to Google from working in the nonprofit sector. So I had like a totally different vision, like coming in, I was like, what the hell is this? Like, really? This is real right here? I mean, like a lot of my thing, like when I was at Google that I felt like, and now like I was part-time too, so I like saw both sides at the same time. You say like aside from money, like it's a side thing, but actually like that's so huge. Like when I was inside Google, I would do everything that I could to get any kind of piece of money or resources that I could for all the organizations that I knew because they have it. They have it. Every company has money that they set aside, but they depend on their employees to tell them where to put that. So the louder you are about where to put that into the communities that you like support, like as like relics of color, you're going to get that like really big support that matters. And like the bigger that it gets, the more that we can do with it. Cause trust me, like we could do a lot with a little. And when we get those big grants, like it allows us to get capacity and really like do big things. And it's your voices that tell your company and force them to give that money to us. Otherwise, they're just going to, some random foundation manager is going to choose nonprofits that are just like, you know, politically, maybe their CEOs are louder or maybe their marketing is louder. But as a employee group, you could say, no, actually, we want to support the local San Francisco nonprofits, not Habitat for Humanity or, you know, USID, which they're great too, but they're not affecting your local base. So like having that voice heard.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, cash always helps for sure. That accelerates things. But as someone who's come from tech and someone who's actually been protested as a gentrifier, like it's really interesting for me to be involved in SOMA Pilipinas because it's traditionally led by activists. And the problem I have is identity politics, the us versus them, when we're all citizens of this city and we're all citizens of California, of the Bay Area. So I think one thing that you could possibly do to help is to try to break down these identity politics by volunteering some time at these local nonprofits, because if they don't have the cash to make things happen, what you're starting to see is that a lot of these nonprofits are wearing like 5 different hats, trying to get certain things done, and they don't necessarily have kind of like the tech fluency that they need to really kind of accelerate like their growth so they can accomplish their mission. So like volunteering goes a long way with a lot of these nonprofits.
Like skilled volunteering, not I mean like showing up and like carrying tables and stuff is very helpful as well. But like, oh, I'm a web designer, like I can help you design your website, or I know analytics, let me help you with analytics, you know. I know Google had a really cool program where their policy team actually brought together groups of Googlers to build systems for the city of San Francisco, you know, things like that. But you could do that on a nonprofit scale and just choose ones you like and offer your services.
Great. Does anybody
Thanks
else?
for that question.
Great question, Ankush. Anybody else have questions or remote? Okay, I think we're good. Thank y'all for coming out, eating the food. I hope it was good. Support your local business. This is from Pampaguena in the Excelsior. Please support them. And also, I want to give a huge shout out to Tyler Mosley. Where are you? Who helped organize. We wouldn't have food if it weren't for him, really. And to Arian Evans here, who is actually my connect to these wonderful people and help to logistics.
She works on my team. You'll see her working on Saturday at Undiscovered
yeah. And
too.
please go see Undiscovered this weekend, going through next 4 months or so. Yeah.
After Saturday, we have a holiday market on December 1st at a new venue where we like encourage everyone to shop local for holiday gifts and stuff.
All right. Thank y'all so much. Hope you come out next time. Thank you.